Nik, thank you so much for joining us on Resilient Retail. I am your host, Kristen LaFrance, and I am so excited that you guys are here today. We have so much to talk about. You guys bring so much expertise to the table on both the e-commerce and the actual physical retail side of things, which is a really big topic right now. So let's just get into it. Can you guys just tell us a little bit about yourself? We can start with Halie.
Absolutely. So I'm Halie LeSavage. I'm the retail writer at Morning Brew. I write our 3 times weekly newsletter, Retail Brew, that covers pretty much everything in the retail industry, from the huge brick and mortar players to up and coming direct to consumer brands to the logistics and social commerce and really anything that's powering the industry at this moment. And around the time we're recording, we currently reach around 140,000 retail professionals, and we're hoping to reach more.
Awesome. Nik, what about you?
Yeah, I'm Nik Sharma. I never really know how to describe myself, but I guess I've just been deep in the world of direct-to-consumer and DTC. Have definitely been on the Shopify train for a few years now. And basically, I help brands kind of grow their revenue online and approach direct-to-consumer in unconventional but new and successful ways.
I love it. Yes, Nik, you are just the D2C guy, I think is
actually,
really
if you
what
search Google, the DTC guy, my name comes up, which is pretty funny.
There we go. There's your whole title. I love it. So obviously so much has changed both in the e-commerce sector and the retail sector. I wanted to bring Nik on, even though he is so focused on just the e-commerce side of things, because with COVID and the pandemic and everything, retailers are having to really adjust and actually embrace a lot of this e-commerce side of things. And so I think, Nik, you bring a ton to the table. Balancing with Halie there, you write and talk to so many in real life retailers all the time. So I think we're going to have a really cool conversation about this. Can you just kind of, Halie, tell us your 2 cents on everything you've seen shifting in the retail space over the last few months?
Absolutely. I mean, we've seen years of change in the span of a couple months on a level that, I hate to use this word, but it really was unexpected. There are some other adjectives I could throw in, but I'm going to restrain myself because everyone's saying them right now. But, you know,
unprecedented?
That might be it.
That might be it.
I'll let the audience decide. But, you know, it has been really startling to see how a lot of companies that weren't prepared to fulfill more orders online or reach their customers online are suddenly trying to switch over to e-commerce or build an omni-channel presence, because with the spread of COVID-19, particularly in the US, brick and mortar stores had to shut down for 2 or 3 months just in the name of safety. And you know, a lot of companies who were digitally native had started tiptoeing into brick and mortar stores right when this all hit. So that caused a lot of plans to change. On the other end, we had these large traditional retailers that were, you know, had stores on the order of thousands or hundreds that suddenly are closing about as many locations due to, you know, recent bankruptcy filings. So a lot of what the pandemic has exposed had been kind of percolating in retail before everything happened. You know, there were a lot of traditional apparel players that didn't have the most sound balance sheets or tie-ins with private equity that led them into, you know, having the basis to then end up filing for bankruptcy in this moment. And the sudden, you know, loss of revenue with stores closing really pushed them into that negative space. But, you know, a lot of it is kind of doom and gloom and seeing Chapter 11 filings every other day and all sorts of layoffs. But I think there is also reason for optimism, which we'll probably get into later. But I think, you know, there's a really interesting opportunity here for players from the level of really small businesses all the way up to larger traditional retailers to really focus on e-commerce and optimizing their omni-channel experiences to reach customers everywhere they can at this moment.
Yeah, absolutely. And Nik, on your side, since you have this really big focus on the e-commerce side and the D2C side, have you seen this shift as well? Are you seeing a lot of retailers like coming to the D2C world, trying to figure out kind of how to even begin to navigate e-commerce?
Yeah, I mean, at the beginning of the pandemic, we had 2 brands that are pretty much, I would consider them household names. They're probably $250 million retail brands. And, you know, they did not even want to spend the time to hire a team. They just wanted somebody to come in and basically jumpstart and figure out, you know, regardless of whether or not this pandemic clears up in the next 3, 6, 9, 12 months, how do we, for next month's revenue, how do we start to make up the ground that we're losing on the wholesale and retail side because, all the big box stores like Costco and Target and Walmart, they're all pulling out of their purchase orders because they're forecasting that they're not going to be selling through as much as they previously had.
Yeah, absolutely. And something you and I have talked a lot about before, especially on Twitter, is in the D2C world, we really saw kind of when the pandemic hit and everything started happening, the brands who had worked to develop very strong brand identities and very deep connections with their customers not only kind of survived, but they actually started to thrive with the e-commerce boom. So taking that over to the retail side, a lot of kind of small single multiple location stores, I don't think really think about brand in the same way and think about content and personal connections and this constant engagement with customers. So if there's a retailer on here listening, where do you even start? How do you begin as a retailer to think about brand and think about relationships so that you can survive the next 6 months to a year and even start thriving in year 2, 3, 4, whatever that is?
I mean, I personally think like even as a retailer, you still have to think omni-channel, right? So even if your business is 100% brick and mortar, it's 100% wholesale, and there is no component of e-commerce, whether that's because, maybe you sell a beverage in a glass bottle that is hard to ship and just doesn't make sense to go through e-commerce. You still need to approach communication and marketing with an omni-channel mindset. So even if you are a product that solely sells in retail, thinking about how you take those inserts in your Amazon packages or copy on the box of your product and bring those people back to you, whether it's through a phone number like you might find Taika doing, whether it's through an email, whether it's through a website, whether it's through a QR code, whether it's through social handles, which is probably the lowest friction way to do it. You still need to think about it in a way of how do you communicate with that customer and still have a way to access them, in times like this where you cannot necessarily see them on the shelf anymore.
Yeah. And Halie, have you seen any kind of cool strategies for retailers actually finding out how to get this contact information? I think there's, I'm just thinking of like a lot of small shops that I go to around Colorado Springs and downtown. I'm not on any of their email lists. I might follow them on social media. So even with less foot traffic, how do these brands start to actually get that contact information so they can start doing this kind of omni-channel communication?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think one thing that's really interesting, you mentioned foot traffic kind of evaporating, but curbside pickup has really taken off as retailers can, in smaller business settings, set up their website for people to place orders online, but they want to come pick it up in person. Establishing a one-to-one connection in person and really bringing the experience of your brand to life, even in that small little pickup section, I think is a great way to, open up lines of communication with a new customer, especially one who in this moment is more mindful of wanting to support small businesses and understand that local communities really depend on small retailers and small shops to, keep their local economies alive. So I think really email address or phone number collection with curbside pickup is a great way to start the conversation. I also think that in, individuals' media presences, so like social media, we all kind of have the opportunity to amplify brands that we're really excited about and put them in contact with our friends or colleagues or anyone out there who might not have discovered them previously. So I'm a big advocate for local bookstores. There's a local bookstore in my area that I'm obsessed with. Whenever I can tweet about it or order from it through their site or through Bookshop, I do, just because it's, a great way to remind people that there are alternatives to things like Amazon and Barnes and Noble out there.
Yeah. And I think that's a huge piece of it is, and we talk about this in the e-commerce world a lot, that Amazon is so convenient and so easy, but you have to kind of differentiate yourself in order to attract people to your brand. And like you mentioned, there's a lot of people that are actually interested in shopping local now, seeing the pandemic and seeing a lot of these big stores close. We're actually getting that kind of emotional driver to go and purchase from a local store and really help our local communities. And something that you mentioned that I think is really important is that personalized experience in store. And I know a lot of retailers are either doing kind of personalized shopping, or when somebody comes into the store, they're really trying to give them that really good shopping experience. Nik, this is something we talk about in e-commerce a lot, is training your customer support team to be able to uphold your brand narrative. How do you begin to kind of train your in-person sales associates when that hasn't necessarily been a conversation you've had before with them?
I mean, I personally think that customer service, any brand that sells direct to consumer, especially, I think most brands should in general, but especially direct to consumer brands are really customer service brands that sell products. Just like every other company is a tech company that sells something, right? Direct to consumer is all their customer service first brands. And that's what, if you think back in the day to Zappos, for example, what set Zappos apart with Tony was the fact that his customer service was the best possible customer service you could ever experience. It was better than walking into a Payless or walking into any kind of shoe store and trying to deal with a return where you don't have the receipt or whatnot, right? But with Zappos, customer service was their number one priority, and it gave them that extra advantage. Customer service is your front lines, whether it's from a marketing perspective. If you're running ads, your customer service team is the first team to know that, for example, a page is down or a product is out of stock. And if you're an actual customer, then the customer service team is really your only interfacing with a brand. So, I think as it comes to store associates too, you look at brands like Buck Mason or Bonobos, or any of these brands that have big direct consumer DNA within them first, and then go to retail. A lot of their sales associates are really just customer service associates who understand the products really well. So, it's still at the forefront. And I think it's actually a great trend that'll continue to last, is that the customer is always first. And your goal at the end of the day is to help them, not necessarily try to sell them on everything, but more so help them find what they're looking for.
Yeah, I think that's something that we talk a lot about. And for retailers, is maybe a new concept, because previously, if you were having lots of foot traffic, you could kind of push customers to sale quicker, and you could really kind of push them through the store, help them find what they need, have them try it on, and then kind of push that sale. But now I think if someone is taking the quote unquote kind of like brave step to go in the store, then I think what needs to happen, and Halie, you might have some thoughts on this, is this kind of slowing down in the store, of taking care of the customer and really just trying to help them, whether or not that means they buy something at the end of the day, and then bringing it back around to, we talk about this omni-channel communication of, if they don't buy that first time, but they have a great experience and you have their email address, there's a lot that you can do. And maybe they wanted a product that you didn't have that day, but you do curbside pickup or local delivery, and you can get their email and let them know when it's actually there. So Halie, have you really seen any kind of trends with this kind of slowing down in the store? Do you think that is the right approach, or is it, something we're kind of missing here?
I definitely think it's something that's to retailers' benefit at this particular moment. And one aspect of the slowing down that I've personally appreciated as a shopper is appointment shopping. So when brick and mortar retailers, have been able to reopen, and in the interest of safety and social distance, they've been having you sign up online for a 1 hour or 30-minute appointment in the store. And I love that, because on the health side, it's obviously great to not feel like you're crowded in with other people if you're antsy about getting back out into stores. But it also gives you a real chance to have a conversation with the associate who's in the store. There's usually only, in the places that I've been, 1 or 2 associates in there. They're excited to see you because business has been what it's been in the past few weeks. They want to tell you about their favorite products. They want to give you recommendations. And, being able to establish that kind of personal connection with someone who's, for all intents and purposes, the face of that brand or that retailer, I think really, forges the kind of community aspect that a lot of direct-to-consumer brands do well online. And now it's kind of happening in store when you feel like you're really part of the community that the brand is trying to foster. But as things reopen again, I'm not sure how much this will last, just because I think, in the interest of driving sales, capacity caps on stores do, guarantee that retailers won't be reaching the levels they did previously. But I would advocate for adopting a slower model, just in the interest for the long game of ensuring that you have a customer that comes back because they feel affinity and loyalty to your brand.
Yeah. And that's something, I don't know if this is a term that a lot of retailers think about, but customer retention, in the sense of, you don't have a subscription. It's not that kind of loyalty, but can you get someone who's bought something from your store or walked into your store to then come back and buy again? And that really comes down to all these omni-channel tactics of building a community, building engagement. So Nik, on your end, you've launched a lot of D2C brands. You've launched a lot of brands that focus on communication and engagement with their customers. Like Judy has this amazing SMS program that everybody talks about how much they love it. Their emails are great. All of this stuff is so important. So for a retailer who's never had to think about e-commerce before, has not really thought about this community building, constant engagement, what channels do they even start on? Where would you recommend they kind of spend their focus with this?
I mean, the thing about customer retention is customer retention community often get cornered into a very particular strategy about how you're supposed to go about it. But at the end of the day, what community is just a group of people who feel like they belong in your customer base per se. And customer retention is just the idea from a marketing side. It's how do you put things out there in the world to your customers to where when you run out of ugly water, you think ugly is the first brand that comes to mind, not Poland Springs, for example, right? So speaking of, so it's basically the idea of what can you put out through the channel. You know, as a big retailer, your channel might be primarily email and social. So what can you put out from a content perspective? Whether it's on social that makes people think, oh, when I run out of this, or when I need to buy my next pair of jeans, or, you know, whatever it is, that they think of your brand first. And from a more tactical, maybe email perspective, it's creating content that actually serves the audience, not necessarily is always selling to the audience. I mean, you mentioned Judy, and with Judy, we have a pretty robust SMS program where every week we send 1 or 2 tips depending on the time of the year, and also depending on your zip code. And with Judy, we've only sent one kind of promo text, and that was to introduce a new product. But every week we send tips that are very accessible and very tactical, which are 2 things that brands often forget when it comes to content. They try to be too aspirational, or Casper's blog is a great example, like, you know, 25 things you can do to better your sleep. 1 is take your phone out of your room. 2 is do this. And they're just things that people would normally never do because they're not very accessible to the average consumer. So I think having tactical and accessible content is really the best form of creating content, but then that content also has to work in a way where it serves that consumer rather than just simply sells to that consumer. And then when you do all that, you know, you build a community as a byproduct, and you stay top of mind to whoever that person is.
Halie, have you seen any cool retailers? I know you talk to people all the time. Have you seen any really cool strategies that we haven't talked about? We've talked about curbside pickup just a little bit, so we can go deeper on that if you want. But are there any other strategies that you've seen larger retailers take that these kind of mom and pop shops could actually learn from and take too?
I think something that has been really impressive to me is the way that smaller businesses in the following the example of larger businesses have just been really candid with their customers about what they're facing right now. I think, you know, a great way to build loyalty is just be honest with your customer about, you know, the challenges you're facing and what you need from your community to get through this moment. I think I read a couple weeks ago that the founder of Entire World, which is a sweatpants and athleisure kind of brand, you know, they're already kind of poised to take advantage of the work at home moment because, you know, I'm wearing a dress right now, but I would be in a pair of sweatpants with this for another day. And, you know, right before the pandemic hit, they sent an email to their email list like, hey, we're expecting this to be a really hard time for our business. We would appreciate your support. I'm kind of blanking on the specifics, but there's a great New York Times article recently called Sweatpants Forever that dives into this a little bit more. But after that email was sent, this company saw some of its best sales that it had seen, you know, in all of its time in business. And part of it was just, you know, meeting the moment and being honest with your consumers. The third thing I would say is also looking for opportunities to collaborate with other businesses. You know, if you are in a small town and you're in a strip mall, who's your neighbor on your left? Who's your neighbor on your right? What can you do together to bundle products or offer, you know, complimentary discounts or some kind of thing that draws business into your specific store, but also for your community. I think a rising tide lifts all boats. It's a cliche, but it's true. And I've noticed, some larger companies collaborating during this time in ways that wouldn't have happened before. And I think a lot of that is just the understanding that the retail community really needs one another in this moment.
Two favorite examples of small businesses collaborating recently. One is the House Restaurant Project, which was basically House found, I think it was 9 other restaurants, or maybe 12. I think it was 9 though. And basically said, let us collaborate on flavors. We will distribute, we have the customers and the kind of the marketing engine, and let us help you. And then the second one, which just came out, I think it was yesterday, was Mad Happy and John and Vinny's, which is another Italian restaurant out in LA. But just great examples of two, not massive businesses, but two businesses that have reach and the marketing know-how and the customers collaborating with counterparts that could really benefit from their help at this time.
Yeah. And I think it's so important because it's really easy, I think, as a retailer to feel like, foot traffic is down. So now I'm in even harder of competition with the people who are next to me. But Halie, to your point, it's actually time to kind of work together and bring it together. Either one of you can answer this question, but if you're a small retailer, you've got 1 store, 2 stores, and you're thinking about these partnerships, how do you go about even really approaching other brands? How do you start thinking about what is a partnership that will serve my customers and also bring me profits and traffic and sales into the store?
Sure. I think, an authentic partnership comes from a couple of different places. One is just really understanding, again, who your customer is and what they'll want. So if you're servicing, 18 to 25 or 30-year-old women in your community and you make apparel, what is a tie-in with food and bev or with beauty that makes sense and also is, local to where you are at this moment? And I think when you reach out to another brand to collaborate, you just need to be honest, say what you really appreciate or admire about that brand. Make sure probably that you've actually been a customer at some point. I think it's pretty obvious when you're, just reaching out to someone because they have more Instagram followers or what have you for the marketing side. But I think, being intentional about who you partner with and ensuring that their kind of values, even on the, hyper local level, are aligned with yours, and that, you'd be kind of reaching the same customer, I think sets you up for something that, makes a lot of sense and will help with growth, but again, also build community in ways that I think we need at this moment.
Yeah. I mean, on the e-commerce side, I would say there's a few different ways you could partner up. One is just a very simple approach a brand, say, hey, we love what you're doing. We think that we have a very similar customer, but maybe not the exact same customers. Let's figure out a way where, if I'm like Omsom, for example, which is a sauce company, and you're Ugly Water, let's figure out a way to cross promote each other's brands through email or social. The other way is you find 2 brands, or you're a brand, you approach another brand and say, hey, let's actually get together and make a product together. Because if we come out with a product that is both native to your customer base in the way that they came in and native to my customer base, it's a great way to expose both brands back and forth. And it's done in a very, not necessarily authentic, but in a way that's still like similar to how somebody came to the brand in the first place. So it's not out of left field. But I think those are the 2 main. The first one is obviously much easier because it's just content swaps, but the second one definitely requires a little more, sourcing and logistics, et cetera.
Yeah, I actually have a really good story on that from local places here in Colorado Springs. So I go to a spin studio and they were actually able to open up and kind of limit class sizes, and it's pretty small, but they're actually able to open and make profits, whereas the store right next door to them is kind of a letterpress store. It's a gift store. It's run by 2 women. They also have kids, and they just haven't been able to open yet. It's just not quite possible for them. And what they actually did was they worked together and they created a t-shirt that was for the spin studio. It was for Pride Month. And it was made by the people next door. And there were signs up everywhere that said like made lovingly by Lady Press. And it was just such a wonderful thing to see like these two community brands come together in such a simple way. But then it was one of those things, you walk out of the spin studio, you just saw this beautiful artwork on a shirt that they made together, and right next door is that other retailer. And even though they're not open, they are open for curbside pickup and local delivery. And personally, like, I bought a bunch of little random cards and gifts there online just last week because I was like, how cute, like they're all supporting each other. I think that goes so far for your customer. And there's this balance between doing what's really good for your brand and what's going to be beneficial for your brand, but mostly focusing on like, what do your customers want and what do they need and what will make them go like, ooh, that's something new. I want to switch gears a little bit because I know this is something that all retailers are kind of panicking about right now, which is Black Friday, Cyber Monday. It's completely unpredictable. You can't really forecast right now what's going to happen. There's people out there saying Black Friday is completely dead. We're seeing Walmart and Target and all these stores saying we're not even going to do it. We're not opening on Thanksgiving Day. And so I think even thinking in terms of like inventory purchasing or how to do sales, it's just this total black box for them right now. So Halie, do you have any advice for someone who's kind of going through that thought process right now of, how do you even begin to think about what Black Friday might look like and what you can do to even, get some sales? Because for a lot of retailers, it's the most profitable time of the year. And now they're looking at it like, I don't know if we're going to even be able to be open or not.
Mm-hmm. That's a great question. And one that, given how rapidly things are changing, I could give you an answer today and it could be rendered completely irrelevant by tomorrow. But, I would say, first of all, to not try to fall too deep into the discount trap. I think a lot of these shopping events have become a race to the bottom, and one that, started as kind of a small localized weekend event, but can even stretch all the way through the holidays and into the new year. And that, ends up damaging your business and damaging the value that customers see your brands having. So especially for newer businesses, I would just, obviously a discount is the easiest way to, generate a sale quite quickly. And that's kind of the purpose of Black Friday and Cyber Monday. But I would, ensure that you are being mindful about what exactly the deal you're offering is, and, taking a step back and looking at kind of your kind of wider financial health, I guess, in this moment.
Thank you guys so much. I only have two more questions to ask you both. First, this series is called Resilient Retail. So start with Halie. What does resilience mean to you, and what does it mean for the industry?
I think for both me and the industry, resilience means having the ability to adapt. There are so many variables that are out of our control, and pandemic or no pandemic, there would also be all sorts of challenges for businesses. And so understanding that you have to be flexible and you have to be willing to change with the times and with what your customers are asking for is essential to survival, and it makes your business all the stronger.
Yeah, Nick, what about you?
Yeah, for myself, I would say, just having spoken and been with and talked to so many different operators since March, I think resilience for us collectively really means adapting for sure, but also just consistently learning and optimizing and trying to figure out how do you not just see something and take it as a roadblock or let it slow you down, but figure out how to get around it and keep moving forward.
Yeah, I love those answers. Just this idea of don't get stuck in your own way. And I think for brick and mortar, especially, that's a really good thing to take away is things are changing. And instead of being kind of upset about the changes, just take it in stride and test new things and talk to your customers and try to find the next step. I think that is the heart of resilience, and that is the heart of this show. Last question, and this is a big one and a tough one to answer. If you had one piece of advice for the merchant who is sitting in and listening right now, who has one brick and mortar location, who is struggling, who is nervous, who doesn't really know what to do in these unpredictable times, they're feeling very uncertain about the future, what would it be?
Nick, do you want to start?
Sure. I mean, I have three things that come to mind.
Perfect.
One is don't be afraid to be vulnerable and be very honest about what's going on. I think everybody can relate to everything going on, and everybody's very open and attracted to the stories of, resilience, but also people being vulnerable. Second, I would say, talk to as many other operators in your field or in your space. That doesn't mean you're vertical, but more so if you own a shop, go talk to as many other shop owners as possible and really understand how they're thinking about things, how they're looking at things, and how they plan to move forward, and collectively, raise each other up. And then the third is test and learn as much as you possibly can, because there's never anything you can put out that people will as a test remember for the rest of their lives and shape your brand by any means. But one test could really, figure something out for you that you would have otherwise never learned.
To add on to all of that, I would just say, don't lose sight of the reasons to be optimistic. I mean, again, we're all dealing with so many challenges. And, if you're someone who owns one store in one small area, it can be terrifying to have to deal with all of these things. But I think if you're, willing to be creative, willing to talk to other, to Nik's point, talk to other business owners and operators in your immediate community or online even, you can find the innovative ways to adapt and change with the times. And that, just solidifies your ability to move into the future of retail. And so I think, being a practical optimist is something that is good for any business owner at this time.
Wow, I am really impressed with those answers, guys. Those were absolutely wonderful. Thank you so much for spending the time and sharing your advice and your wealth with the industry. We will make sure that in the show notes and everything, there are links to follow Halie and Nik. After this, you should definitely read both of their stuff. It's amazing. Thank you guys again for showing up today. I really appreciate it.